Okay, we should be live.
All right, great. Thank you, Aria. We're going to go ahead and start by doing a quick roll call for this virtual meeting of the Citizens Participation Committee. Do I have here Jim?
Yes, I'm on. Thank you.
This conference will now be recorded.
Oh, there we go. Steve?
Present.
Jean?
Present.
And Deanna?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
And then from our staff, we have Doug.
I'm here.
Yep. Tim, I'm also here. Aria and Michael, I believe you both are back there as well.
We are both present.
All right, awesome. That's all we have for now. And if anyone joins us in progress, we'll include them in the meeting minutes.
Tim, if you are making the minutes from the recording, it started recording after Jim Beatty said here.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that, Jim. Okay, so going on to the first item on the agenda for this month, we have the minutes from the June meeting. So I would take a motion for approval.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion from Steve. Do we have a second?
Second from Deanna.
Awesome, thank you, Deanna. So we'll go ahead and just do a roll call vote. Jim?
Yes.
Okay, Steve?
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
And Deanna?
Aye.
All right, very good. The minutes are approved. So we're going to go ahead and get into our program now. And the first item on there is the Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan. So I'm going to try to switch over to this. Doug from our office is going to be the main person presenting this. So Doug, go ahead and take it away.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Doug, Senior Transportation Planner here at the Area Plan Commission. For the last approximately year and a half, I've been working on this updated report. And to kind of give you some background information, the Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan looks at transportation issues that many of us don't normally think of. Specifically, we focus on three groups: those who are elderly, those who are disabled, and those who have low income. They have transportation needs that some of us may not even be aware of. Generally, a lot of us are able to grab our car keys, jump in the car, and go anywhere we want. There are those who are in these three groups that do not have that luxury and have to use other means of transportation. The original plan that we did, at least the first one, was adopted back in 2008. And the Federal Transit Administration requires us to do this plan. There's also a requirement from the Transportation Act, or the most current one, the FAST Act, and it needs to be updated every 5 years. With the original one being adopted in 2008, we did actually update the plan in 2015, and then of course we have now a new updated plan, and we would like to present it to you this evening. The transportation plan itself basically follows the same format as the two previous plans. The first part, we identify all the transportation providers who are in Tippecanoe County. The second part of this, we have a lot of figures showing where these groups live, especially where there's concentrations. The third section basically identifies the issues the groups face regarding transportation. And the fourth, we develop solutions, strategies, and activities. And finally, the fifth, we look at projects specifically look at rankings or how should we carry out these projects. I will have to say, in terms of developing this report, it was considerably more challenging than the previous two because of COVID. For one, when we first started this venture last year, the initial thought was to survey persons in these three groups, but unfortunately, at the time when we were going to do that, because of the COVID restrictions, we just simply couldn't do that. And second, we did have several meetings when we had or invited stakeholders for their input. We had to do them online. The previous two meetings, we were all together, one big room. We had many different ways to gather input. We had very good discussion. And to be honest, it was really good coordination and communication between all the service providers. So even though it was a little bit more challenging to put this report together, we did get through it, and I'd like to present the report, or at least bits and pieces of it, to tell you about it. So if we go on, start with the first part in terms of another reason why we put this report together is because the Federal Transit Administration does have some federal funds that are available to provide services to these three groups. There are several agencies in Tippecanoe County that do take advantage of that. The biggest one, of course, is City Bus. And in order to federally fund these specific projects, they must be listed in this report. So it's critical that, not only do we report or put this report together, but also that we provide good a look at the issues, challenges, and then come up with strategies, solutions. Another agency that uses these specific funds is Area 4. They provide service in the county, which is very helpful to those residents who live in rural areas. Last year, when we first started this report, we sent out a letter to basically over 130 individuals, services, agencies, groups. First of all, to let everyone know that we were starting to develop this report and why we were developing this report. And then we also included with that a list of transportation providers that we knew through reporting through the previous plan and then through putting together other documents. And we asked the group, those persons, to look at that list and then tell us if we missed any. And sure enough, we did. We missed a few. Some of them were new. Some of them I've never even heard of. And some of them, for example, specifically, there is one church that provides transportation services to employees at Subaru, which surprisingly I really never heard of previous to this development. So it was very interesting. Then what we did was then conduct a survey, and we did this last September, and we conducted the survey through a PDF format, a simple fill out. We reached out to all of the providers and asked them that they fill out the surveys. We had a very good response rate initially. It was something like 50, 60%. But we really wanted to go for the golden ring and get 100%. So we did a lot of follow-up phone calls, emails, and sure enough, we did reach that 100% response rate, or like I would say actually 98%. We did there was two agencies that just didn't respond. So anyway, we were able to get that information through various means, specifically like their websites. In the survey, we asked a variety of different questions, and you can see on the screen here for the different agencies, for example, the Angels Senior My screen's pretty small. Well, anyway, we have for each agency a list of the information that we asked, and we boiled this down. We did ask a lot more, but we asked for, one, what was their mission statement? Thank you for increasing that font size. Who were the clients that were served? Trip destinations. What is their service area? What is their operation time? Vehicle fleet. What are the fares that they charge? And then the eligibility requirement. And we took all of the information from the surveys and added it to the report or document for each one. So when you get a chance to actually look through the report, you will see for each agency all of that information. Now, as a side benefit to getting all of this information and knowing who the transportation providers are and what services they do provide, we actually worked on and completed a side project, and that was done several months ago, and that was a transportation resource guide. We do have them available on our website, and I apologize, don't have one to bring up. But it's a great handout. It's a little like trifold that easily fit into a pocket, but we have on there the agencies, for example, City Bus. We have non-profit transportation providers. We have private transportation providers, senior transportation only, taxi services, ambulance, medical services, both emergency and non-emergency, and out-of-town services. So this was actually a product of an earlier report that said, told us that this is something that was needed where there was not one-stop shop for all of this information. So I believe this is the third time we've updated this. And this year we did it a little different. Last time we did this, we had it in both English and in Spanish, but this year we had it not only in English and Spanish, we have it also available in Chinese, Korean, and then Swedish. In terms of populations, looking at the minority populations, of course, Hispanic is the largest. Thank you for putting that up. The largest one, and then the second and third largest ones are Korean and Chinese. So all the other minority populations are considerably smaller when looking at the number of persons who live in Tippecanoe County. So again, the service was provided, a one-stop shop to help people who need transportation. I will have to report, I need to double check. Unfortunately, since we did put this together a couple months ago, I believe the senior transportation services, Lafayette Senior Transport and Concierge, and then Carl's Taxi Service have went under. I've been trying to reach them and unfortunately have had no success at this point, so unfortunately that's happened. But anyway, it's a great one-stop shop document. So kind of getting back to the document, the heart of the meat is basically the next pieces, and the first piece of this is looking at demographics, where these people live, where are the concentrations, basically to help us serve these areas better. And in the past, we did have a demographic section, but we did expand this significantly and look at a lot of additional demographics. We had actually 30 different figures. Of course, we looked at persons who are 65 and older, and we looked at this not only by number and percentage, but also who are 65 and older and also disabled, who are 65 and older and living in poverty, and 65 and older with a disability and in poverty. We also looked at persons with a disability percentage. We looked at the number of persons with a disability and income below poverty, number of persons, of course, living in poverty, percentage of persons living in poverty, number of persons working full-time and living in poverty, working part-time living in poverty, and then not working and living in poverty. And then we continued with that. We looked at number of households with no vehicles and also with just one vehicle. And of course, if you look at these maps that Tim's scrolling through really quick, we had to use American Community Survey census data, and unfortunately this data is only down to the tract size. So we have a rough idea. It would have been nice to have had the data in block group, but unfortunately it's only available by tract. We looked at additional number of occupied housing units. We looked at occupied housing units with a household income less than $15,000. We looked at owner-occupied housing units with household income less than $15,000, renter-occupied housing units with income less than $15,000. And then something new that we added this year, and this was noted in the previous document in terms of the number of veterans who are now in the various different groups. For example, 65 and older, who are disabled, and who have low income. So we decided to do a specific demographic set for that. And we looked at, of course, the number of veterans by tract, 65 and older with a disability who live in poverty. And then to finish it out, we looked at where retail, non-retail, and manufacturing jobs are. So it's a very extensive demographic analysis, and hope you have some time after this to review these maps. It was quite enjoyable putting these because, you know, some of the maps you think, oh yeah, these are where this is. For example, right now, manufacturing jobs. Of course, we see the big one at Subaru. No surprise there. So anyway, this gives us an idea of where these persons live, especially the concentrations. For the next section that we looked at, we also looked at figuring out what are the gaps, barriers, challenges, the issues that these three groups face. And of course, here in the office in APC, we don't have regular contact with these three groups. So we invited our group of 130 or so stakeholders to a meeting, and we held this last December. And we started looking first off at what were these challenges, barriers, and gaps from the previous plan. And we reviewed those to see which ones were still a problem or still an issue, which ones were still an issue, but yet there's some changes so they needed to be updated or modified. And then, of course, we looked at ones that were new, and then also there were some from the 2015 plan that basically no longer applied for various different reasons. And for those that are modified, new, and those that are removed, we put additional information in each one. We just didn't simply list it as they were removed. As you can see here, issues removed, most transportation is during the day. And then this was basically a summary of what the stakeholders discussed during the meeting. So the reader has an idea of why they were removed, or likewise, why some of them were new, or why some of them were modified, or not modified. Yes, modified. And of course, we did this for all three groups. We did this individually, first with the disabled group, then the elderly group, and then also those with low income. So this basically just took one whole entire meeting. And it's interesting, I mean, just basically, hopefully when you have a chance to look through it, there's different reasons why, or challenges that these people face, and kind of giving a basically, you know, a base, large overview. Some of the issues were based on, you know, where's the origin or where's the destination of the trip. Basically service times, basically service options, even weather played a factor. Let me see if I can get to some of them. Other factors, basically, you know, a lot of them were dealing with services that there was limited. And we even had some that basically were related to infrastructure. This kept coming up over and over again, specifically geared towards city bus, but yet also to the cities, in that, you know, trying to get to a bus stop, and then also at a bus stop, that yes, there are a lot of bus stops, and it would be nice, and the city bus is trying to make improvements to those, but we have a lot of sidewalks that simply just don't go to the bus stops. So that's a challenge, and we've noted that, and that popped up, you know, with the different groups. So, you know, that was a fairly lengthy exercise to go through and identify what the issues, the gaps, barriers, and challenges were. And we're very thankful that, you know, we did have a good group of stakeholders that could help us identify this. So then what's next? So the following meeting, or follow meeting after that, we looked at basically the three groups again, and we looked at what we called the need, and then developed or came up with different strategies. And basically, this is somewhat color-coded, where the issues are by group are highlighted in blue, and then the need is kind of highlighted in like salmon color. So it's a little earlier in the document than what is shown right now, Tim. So if you can scroll up a few more pages. There you go. And basically, we did this exactly for all three groups. We took the needs that were identified, and again, we broke them out by, you know, the issues that were carried over, the issues that were modified, the new issues. So we went through each one and reviewed, discussed, changed strategies, removed strategies, added strategies, so that for each need we had a very, you know, some needs only had one or two, some of them had, you know, several. For example, the one showing transporting second and third shift workers is challenging. And then the strategies you can see there, we had 6 that were developed. So that basically, that meeting was held earlier this year in May. So once we decided or came up with these strategies, we also had a discussion at that meeting. What do we do now? In the previous 2 reports, we decided at that time that, in essence, basically it came down to there's 2 main strategies that really are overriding to this whole document. And we felt those 2 were top priority over everything. And one is providing additional service. And of course, providing additional service, you need additional money. So when we had the discussion as to how to handle the next section in terms of ranking or looking at all the individual projects, we decided again to state that those 2 issues, additional service, additional money, were the top priorities. We need both. And then for all of the strategies that were listed, those were distributed between various groups or agencies. For example, we had a list of projects or strategies specifically just to the Area Plan Commission. We had some specific to local government agencies. And then as you see on the web here, and we had some that were basically assigned to City Bus, what, you know, suggested that they work on. So, so that, you know, in the past when we worked on this, we decided to, because we do not have control over funding or control over these agencies, that we say you need to work on this project first, or this project second, or third. We left this up to the agencies to fund whatever strategies they can fund, and so far we've had some success. I mean, we've had other projects come out of this. For example, you may have heard of a new service that just started with City Bus called the Flex service. One area that has been a challenge to serve is the Wabash Avenue area, and City Bus has served this in the past, but they've served this, with the big fixed route, and basically, in the past it just doesn't work with the large bus. So they've tried something new. They are basically using the smaller vans, and they have something. It's something similar to Lyft and Uber, where you call in ahead and schedule the trip. They come pick you up and take you to your destination. So something similar to Lyft, Uber, or taxi service. So that's basically that program suggested, out of this. And then also the City Bus is once again serving community corrections. That was also identified as an area or a need. The persons who go to that do need transportation, and because of its location, it makes it very difficult to get there, whether they're going or coming from. So because these projects were listed in this report or the previous report, City Bus can use those special federal funds that we talked about previously. So they don't have to dip into their regular assistance that they receive from the Federal Transit Administration. So that helps them give the ability to have additional service. So basically, in a nutshell, half an hour or so, that's the entire document and what we are looking to do with it, or what it covers. Right now we're going through the adoption process. We started that, of course, last month. We presented it to our Technical Transportation Committee, and they recommended approval to our policy board. And in addition to going through the process, it is right now open for public comment. We do have it available on our website, and we did put it up on their social media sites, Facebook and Nextdoor. Tonight we're kind of officially presenting it to the public for comments and questions, so that we hope that if we can answer all those tonight, tomorrow our plans are to present it to the policy board for their adoption. However, if we do get some questions or comments and we need to go back and rethink a few things or look at a few things, of course, that time tomorrow, we will ask that the policy board hold off for another month and then make those changes. So that's where we're standing at with this report. I went through it fairly quickly and apologize. I do have paper copies. Unfortunately, I can't hand them out. There is a lot of information here. So this time, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free and ask, and hopefully I'll be able to ask those. Yes, Jim.
Yeah, hi, Jim Beatty here. Hey, very thorough, well thought out. Maybe somewhere I missed in there, but there's thousands of Purdue students who can't afford cars and get around. How does that influence or bias a report like this? And there's hundreds, if not thousands, of scooters. And how did you incorporate the scooter technology into your report? I had a young man tell me the other day that his goal was to live in a city so he didn't have to own a car that burned carbon, and he'd either take public transportation or use a scooter, or a little scooter thing. So that's my curiosity on that. Thank you.
Sure. Sounds like a two-parter there. For the first part, in terms of looking at the demographics, when you look at the different ones, especially, low income or, renter occupied housing units here with less than 15,000. Of course, you see the dark purple areas are not surprising, areas where you see a large population of students. We're very well aware of that. I mean, this was actually noted in the previous two documents, especially in the first one. And fortunate enough that, you know, if you do look at where City Bus provides transit service, they do have extensive service system, you know, especially around the campus area. I mean, they specifically have loops or routes just around the campus, and they do have routes that address, you know, that portion of West Lafayette, you know, around Klondike, Northwestern, and they do have a shuttle service for several, you know, apartment complexes that the apartment complexes actually pay, so that students who live there can ride the bus. We had some discussion in terms of, you know, with that in the, if I remember correctly, within the low income, in terms of strategies. Now, regarding scooters, you know, it's kind of interesting. That actually never did really appear, especially when we were talking with our stakeholders. I know the scooters are used quite a bit extensively with students, but in terms of like when we were talking with, let me see, various different agencies, the use of scooters, you know, that never did arise. I mean, we're focused on more issues, for example, van services. And it's interesting, you know, for example, City Bus has that access service they provide, which is great, and it's fairly extensive. But if you want to ride that use that service, you have to get to the curb. Well, we noted that with the elderly and disabled persons, a challenge, especially a new one that we really discussed, was a need for services that start not on the curb, but actually at the door. So to answer the question regarding scooters, we never really did have any discussion regarding that. So that didn't appear in the document. So I hope that answers your question.
How many scooters are registered in Lafayette and West Lafayette?
Yeah, I can actually speak a little bit to the scooters specifically. I'm assuming, Jim, that you're talking about the e-scooters that the companies like Bird and Spin put out.
Yeah, I don't know their name. I just have to avoid them when I'm driving. The little two-wheelers with the handball.
Yes, those are the ones we're talking about. Yeah. So there are a couple things that are going on with those. So the companies that provide those have to negotiate with each city how many units they will put out there, and that number can actually fluctuate a little bit. But the company has to pay like a per unit fee for how many they deploy. So it will change a little bit depending on the time of year. So obviously during the winter, there are a lot fewer of them than you will see, you know, during the fall. So right now is kind of one of the peak times when they have their largest number of units deployed. And as far as how that plays into things for persons with low income, the scooter providers are actually required to have a program where they offer discounted fares for people using their services. So if that's something that would apply to a person, they can fill out some sort of application through the app on their phone with the provider, and then that can be something that they get, I guess, fare assistance, you would call it, I suppose, from them. And that is something that is something that's handled by the providers. So like Doug said, some of the strategies, especially the funding types of things, are handled by providers directly. And the scooters would certainly fall under that, although we didn't have too much success with reaching out to those companies in regards to this specific plan. But that is something that still exists. So it's kind of running parallel to the work that Doug has spearheaded with this plan.
Thank you. I'm sure there's teens and 20-year-olds that are below the poverty level on the Lafayette side of town that could take advantage of these scooters if they were around.
Mhm.
So appreciate you thinking about that in future planning, particularly sidewalks.
Yes, there is also, in addition to this plan, there is a scooter, like a statewide committee about scooters and ADA issues. So because scooters are often parked on sidewalks, sometimes if they're not parked properly, they can, infringe on the ability of a person with a mobility challenge to use the sidewalk properly. If it's blocked, it's very hard for someone in a wheelchair to, get around. They have to kind of find an alternate path. So that committee has people from different MPOs. It has someone from NDOT, from Federal Highway, Health by Design. So there are a lot of organizations that are represented on that committee. And right now the committee is working on putting together kind of some key points, I guess, for ordinances for these types of scooters, which will primarily be of assistance to smaller areas in the state that are maybe interested in getting some of these scooters deployed but aren't quite sure how to handle that. So that doesn't necessarily apply directly to us because we kind of already have them. We already have some ordinances. But I think it could still potentially be an opportunity for us to, leverage some of the work that committee is doing and kind of look at how it might impact some of our ordinances, and maybe if we can make some refinements to those to better serve some of these populations that we're talking about. I think we can still get some benefit from that committee's work.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to take up the whole meeting. Thank you very much.
Hey, Doug.
Hello, Amy.
I was just curious if anything came up during this process about rural communities. I know, obviously, most of the population's the densest in the city, so that's where you see the most, colors come up on these census tract maps. But if anything, I'm just curious if anything came up with issues that rural communities are facing.
So one couple things here is that, in some of the demographic maps, if you look at those, you will see concentrations, of course, as you would expect in Lafayette or West Lafayette, but there are some that actually have concentrations that are actually in the either suburbs or, surprisingly, in the rural townships. I don't remember one right off the top of my head that would be a good example. Well, hold on. Here's one. It'd be figure 5 on page 29. So if Tim could scoot up real quick on that. And this basically, this figure is number of persons who are 65 and older and disabled. And of course, if you look on the eastern side of the county, there's a big dark brown spot. So if you go one figure down, there we go. So as you can see, persons who are 65 and disabled, you will see basically 3 areas of concentrations. One on the near east side of Lafayette, on the south side, basically suburban Lafayette, and then of course I believe that's Perry Township. So it's kind of interesting that we have a concentration of that specific group in that area. In looking at discussing the various different groups, that came up constantly. The issue is that there are not only group homes, but there are also services that are outside of the city bus, limits in terms of, what they actually consider who they serve. Basically, roughly 3/4 miles of a walk outside of their route. And that was noted. I mean, in previous reports, we've noted group homes that are located outside. But this time, in actual discussion, we also noted that there are a number of other services that do provide, whatever benefits to these three groups that are unfortunately cannot be served by city bus. So, of course, some of the strategies were, for city bus to look at how to serve those, and then there were some other ones as well. So, providing service to the rural areas, is challenging. But I will have to say, Area 4 basically has stepped up and is now providing service to Tippecanoe County. For years, they only provided service for those people who lived in Loramie Township on the southeast part of the county to areas like Lafayette or West Lafayette. But about 2 years ago or so, they decided to change that service and provide transportation to anyone who lives outside of the basically the urbanized area, Lafayette and West Lafayette, and transport them to, say, another area in that rural area, or to an area inside, whether it be Lafayette or West Lafayette. And they're using federal funds for that, that they haven't used before. So since it was identified in the previous report, they were able to expand their service and tap in those transit funds to provide a more broader, bigger service. I mean, the issue, interesting, like right now that they're having is a lack of drivers, just like school systems. They simply don't have enough drivers. They have people who want the service, but they don't have enough drivers to provide it. So, and we noted that in the report as well. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Gene Croshan. Was climate change and reducing carbon footprints taken into account at all in the plan?
At this time, no, we didn't specifically address those. Basically, since this is a short-range plan, again, in 5 years, we'll be going through, or actually less than 5 years, we'll be going through and starting this report again, and then again going through probably the same process and tapping into the stakeholders who actually see the issues and figure out maybe, they may cause a problem. That's something we're looking at, in our long-range plan. But at this point, in this plan, basically, it's just a short-range plan looking at, what can we do to address the needs now. There were considerably a lot of them. Some of them crossed over actually between the three different groups, but we didn't address specifically climate change in terms of how that may affect transportation. So in a nutshell, we did not.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what Doug's saying, that is something that is a big area of emphasis in our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which we are also working on right now, and we will be presenting that document in more detail to this committee sometime next year when it's ready for adoption. But that's one of the big things that we're overhauling from our previous plans, is how we evaluate the impacts of climate change and those impacts specifically on transportation. So if you were to look at our current plan, the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, there's not too much in there, but the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is the one we'll be presenting next year, will have a lot more information about that. And we actually recently have gotten a couple of staff members with some environmental engineering background that have been tremendously helpful in kind of getting us up to speed on putting some more best practices into that document.
So any additional questions or comments about this report? And again, if you haven't looked through it or read it, please take a few minutes, or probably take more than a few minutes to actually read it. Again, put a lot of work into this in terms of, you know, the mapping, the surveying, with the stakeholders meetings to get their input as to see what are the issues, the gaps, the barriers, and challenges, and trying to address those. So again, if you have any additional comments or questions, please feel free to either call or email us, and we're more glad to ask those.
Hey, Doug.
Hey, Doug. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Doug, this is Steve.
Yes, Steve.
I'm sure it's in the document, but how do you get up-to-date information on things like poverty and disabilities? I mean, age is fairly easy and straightforward, but since you have to update it every 5 years, I was just curious, you know, how you get up-to-date information.
Well, when we started this report, the most recent available information from the U.S. Census Bureau was the 2017 5-year, and we used the 5-year instead of the 1 year because we always feel that the 5-year estimate is more accurate than the 1 year. And they update that continually, so if we had to redo it again, we would look at what available we have. For example, 2010 or 2020 census data will be rolling out within the next couple years, so next update we probably will actually use the decennial census information. But in terms of everything you see here that's mapped came from the Census Bureau, except for the employment, which we did receive that information from a private vendor, and actually the Indiana Department of Transportation paid for that information, and as a benefit we were able to get that information for Tippecanoe County. So again, at the time when we started putting this together, that was the 2017 5-year American Community Survey data was the most recent, so that's what we used. And actually for each figure, if you look at, we also have specifically what table it is in. So at the bottom you can actually see specifically where we got that information. I found that to be missing in a lot of reports. So so if you had any questions or comments, you know, in terms of, you know, where did they get this from, you can actually go on the census website and then look at this specific table, and you can see it yourself.
Okay, great. So a lot of it is based on estimates based off of past data, the survey data.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Sure.
Doug, I know you said you all had recommendations in the report, but you can't enforce those things. But were you able to sort of rank or prioritize any of the recommendations?
Well, the only two, you know, and we followed basically the pattern or the format of the previous two reports, the one original in 2008 and then in 2015. And at that time, we didn't feel that we should go through and individually rank all of the strategies. Basically, in the discussion from the previous two plans, and then when we discussed it for this one, we all agreed that the two projects or the two strategies that are most important that we all need to work on are, one, provide additional service, and two, try to find additional funding for that additional service. Those are our two top priorities. For all the other strategies that are listed, we basically allocated or put those under which organization would best be able to provide that strategy or address that strategy. And then that leaves it up to the organization for like City Bus or the nonprofit organizations. They can look at that list and then figure out, okay, we have a certain amount of funds, we can do this project. or we can do this project, or we can do this project. So we're not trying to pigeonhole, you know, like a specific group, say for example, and I'm just pulling this out, like Wabash Center, you know, the top priority is this strategy and the second is this strategy. So we list the strategies, and then it's up to them in terms of if they have the additional funding, if they have the additional staff. These are the projects that we feel, you know, in putting this document together that need to be done. So it's basically leaving it up to the individual agency to pick and choose.
Thanks.
Sure.
All right, Aria here. I just wanted to say that on YouTube and Facebook, we don't currently have any public comments. And I don't believe we have anyone in the room either making a comment.
Well, again, thank you for listening, trying to put all this together and, you know, presentation here, the whole document in half an hour. So thank you for bearing with me on that, and thank you for the good questions. As our plans are, since it appears, you know, we don't have any earth-shattering changes that we need to make, we do plan to present it to our policy board at tomorrow's meeting and ask that they adopt this document. So again, thank you for listening in and for the comments.
All right, so I think with that, then we'll go ahead and move on to our next agenda item. So this is an informational kind of item. It's about the 2021 Mpo Conference. So earlier we had a question regarding some of the impacts of climate change. So every year a different MPO from around the state will host a conference, and each conference has kind of a specific theme. Well, this year it's our turn to host, and we are going to be doing a one-day virtual conference on October 28th, and the theme of that revolves heavily around climate change. So we have been working to get some presenters lined up for that, and some of those presenters do include professors from Purdue. We have some people from Federal Highway in the works who can tell us about some of the work that they're doing up in Washington. Someone from the, National Association of Regional Councils, I believe, is on the list. So we're kind of trying to finalize exactly who's going to be on that. But if that is something that people on this committee are interested in listening in on, we will be recording all of those sessions and posting them on our website. Now, last year we also hosted a similar conference. We've kind of done it 2 years in a row because of the pandemic. We had hoped that one of these 2 years we could do an in-person 3-day conference, which has been the traditional format, but that didn't come to fruition. So we've instead settled for 2 one-day conferences the last 2 years. So you can view presentations from the previous conference, so last year's conference, the 2020 conference, on our website. Those are available right now. So if this is something that you're interested in and kind of seeing what's going on in the transportation world with relationship to some of those, Aria has posted them in the chat there. So that's something that may be of interest to some of you. And like I said, we will be posting presentations from the 2021 conference after that happens on October 28th. So that's just something we wanted to make you aware of. So that was a very timely question that you had about that, Gene. So thank you for bringing that up. Any further questions about this item? I will take that as a no. Okay, so then we'll move on to our third item, which is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan Survey. So I'm going to see if I can pull this up here. Yeah, here we go. So this is a survey that is currently open, and it will be open until next Monday. So you have until the rest of, or until Sunday, I guess, really, well, Monday morning to fill this out if you haven't already. So this is something that I'm going to send around an email to our distribution list with a link to take this survey. And what it is what I'm showing right now, where we kind of divide it into different categories. So the first one is about roads, issues with roads. So the way this is formatted is that you could type in an answer here if there was a specific issue about roads in different parts of the community. You can give us feedback about where you might like to see new roads built. Feedback as well about problem intersections or stretches of road. And not all of these, however, are just focused on personal vehicles and car problems. We do have some things about bus shelters. As Doug mentioned in his summary, we know that that is one of the issues. This is kind of the amenities that are available or not available at certain stops. So that's something we've been working with City Bus on. So trails, of course, another very important part of the transportation system. Places where, you know, there might be trails that are in poor repair, or where someone might like to see a new trail, which is the next question. So again, trails, very important part of the transportation network. Bike lanes, sharrows, anything we can do to provide additional kind of signage and pavement markings for cyclists is very important. Sidewalks, of course, another important part of the transportation system. We are also working on another project where we are doing a sidewalk inventory in relationship to the Americans with Disabilities Act for some of the small towns in Tippecanoe County, so Dayton, Battleground, and Clarks Hill. So we're in the process of doing some data collection for that now. So that's kind of tied to this survey. And then again, similarly to the trails, also a question about new sidewalks. So that is kind of what we're seeking feedback on. We've gotten a little over 230 responses so far to this survey, but we'd love to keep getting some more. So like I said, I'm going to send this out to the distribution list tomorrow. So I know that all of you that are in the meeting are on that. So you will be receiving that. And then we'll go ahead and see what we get. And then once we close the survey, we'll kind of be sorting through some comments and trying to see if there were any particular areas that got kind of multiple comments or that were identified by several survey respondents. And kind of the end goal of this is to feed it into our Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So we've talked at previous meetings, I know not all of you may have been able to attend those, but about some of the goals and objectives for that plan. And so now we're kind of trying to look at, okay, where are the problem areas that we can identify potential future projects, maybe so like new trails where that could be built that could improve connections so that people can take more trips on trails, so they won't have to rely so much on their own personal vehicles, or maybe just where we can repair perhaps sidewalks that are in impassable state, as this one is in this picture that I have in the survey, things along those lines. So we're going to kind of combine the public feedback with some of the other documentation that we have, including lists from previous transportation plans. So we're going to be working very closely with the city engineers and county highway engineer as well, those departments, to kind of try to look at some priorities for how we can spend some of the different types of funding that we get to really get the most value out of our dollars that we put into the transportation network. So this survey is one component of that. I would absolutely encourage any of you who have not taken this to go ahead and take it. And like I said, I will go ahead and send this link around tomorrow. So look out for that in your inbox. Are there any questions about this survey?
don't see any questions on the web right now.
Okay, thank you for checking on that, Aria. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and move on to our next item on the agenda, which is just general questions, comments, and suggestions. So if there's anything that any of you would like to bring up for discussion, now is your chance. And if no one does bring up anything, we know that the streams are a little bit behind, so we will take a few minutes to wait for those to catch up just in case. But I would like to give everyone on the committee a chance to bring up any questions, comments, or suggestions you have at this time.
This is Deanna. Can you hear me?
Deanna. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to know just generally what plans are being impacted, especially future planning plans with COVID still being up in the air and the different streams and impact on the workforce and the number of people who are on public transportation. I'm just wondering if there are any emergency plans that have turned into, long-term planning because of COVID.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will say in terms of most of our kind of regular planning activities, we've still been able to kind of get through those. We've been able to kind of modify what we've done in the past to still be able to collect feedback from the public, which is a very important part of any planning effort that we do is how we get input from the public. So we have been able to get through that with at least some degree of success. It is a little harder when you can't go out and meet people face to face, which is what we would really like to do. But that's just not feasible, unfortunately, given the current environment like you're talking about. As far as other plans, so we don't have any kind of jurisdiction over what policies that other organizations set in place. So any sort of like mask mandates on public transportation or any of those sorts of things, those are not within our purview. So that's something that the individual organizations handle themselves. We also don't have any impact on what any mayors or elected officials may put into place in terms of requirements. So that includes, work from home sorts of things. We do know that we've kind of seen a bit of a national trend of a lot of places are transitioning fully to work from home sorts of models, and they're saying, well, maybe we don't really need huge offices. We can have at least part of our workforce work from home, which is great for transportation because it, reduces how many people have to spend time commuting and those sorts of things. So things like that are mostly out of our control. So all we can really do is kind of try to monitor those impacts and take a look at, if we see substantial reductions in traffic, for example, then, we might adjust where we would be spending some of our funding. But we have been monitoring traffic, and what we've seen is that there isn't currently really a noticeable drop off. Things are kind of currently back to pre-COVID levels, even in spite of the continued rise in cases, I guess, and so on. People are still finding ways to travel around, at least as far as our traffic count data tells us. It's at least close to what it was pre-COVID, especially on the larger roads. Does that answer your question, Deanna?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
That was a very good question. Thank you for asking. Any other questions that anyone on the committee has? Okay, it sounds like we've answered all the committee's questions, so while we wait just a little bit more for the stream to catch up for any potential public comments, I would like to mention that our last meeting for the year will be on December 8th. That will also be virtual, so for any committee members that may have missed it, at our last meeting, we determined that it would be best for this meeting to continue to be virtual going forward. So we will continue to use this format. We won't be going back to in-person anytime soon. If the committee ever does desire to resume or restart, I guess, meeting in person, then we will be happy to evaluate that. But the general consensus of the committee was that this is pretty convenient for people. It's maybe a little easier for them to join in when they don't have to worry about, you know, getting to the Tippecanoe County office building, you know, after work or whatever. It's just a lot easier for people's schedules to keep it virtual, and it's also helpful in, you know, minimizing human-to-human contact in this challenging time of the pandemic. So a lot of benefits to keeping it virtual. So we will continue to do that. And like I said, December 8th, so same time, 6 p.m., and it will be a virtual meeting again. So with that, Aria, are there any questions or comments that have come in on our social media streams?
Yeah, it's been more than a minute since you said that, and I see no comments at this time on Facebook or YouTube.
Okay, thank you very much for monitoring that. And so with that, we will be adjourned. Thank you all for participating. We really appreciate, you know, hearing your questions and comments on this. And we look forward to seeing you on December 8th.
Okay, stay safe.
All right,
Yes, you too. Everybody have a great evening.
You
Thanks,
too.
everyone.
Bye-bye.